Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Slipstream Entrepreneurs podcast. I am your host, Rich Wharton, and I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Hannah Brooks. Hannah, how are you today?
I'm very good. Still morning, so yeah, good.
We are winning. We are winning. And we are absolutely delighted to be joined by none other than Steve Price, who is the Chief Brand Officer over at LKYSUNZ. Steve, thank you for joining us. How are you?
It's officer, actually. But I'll let that slide. You're off brand already. I'm joking. I'm very well. And to have a point, I normally do this in the evening. So it feels a bit like vampire status,
Yeah.
doing anything during the day like this. I'll pretend it's evening. There you go.
Okay.
You
That's
remind
what
me of the American Office, where Dwight is the deputy to the deputy to the deputy to the deputy of the assistant regional manager.
He's the assistant to the manager, not
That's
the
the
assistant
one.
manager. I love that show. I've actually watched that show back to back about 4 times.
Yeah, guilty.
It's just easy to have it in the background, and there's so many of them. You can just watch
20-minute
it.
episodes, just bosh them out, can't you? It's great.
Absolutely, love it. So yeah, there you go. Hopefully, we're not creating The Office with LKYSUNZ, but we probably are.
Well,
I don't know which one.
It'll make some good entertainment, though. Anyway, no,
Yeah.
smashing. So, before we talk about LKYSUNZ and your role there, etc., tell us a little bit about Steve Price before LKYSUNZ. What you've been doing. Tell us the journey.
How far back do you want me to go? I mean, I had to have my stomach pumped when I was born because I apparently got a bit greedy. Is that how far back you want me to go?
Yeah, that's good.
That's an interesting conversation. That is. Let's go.
It's actually why if I get really bad colds, it's why I get really bad chest infections, because apparently this is like the late 70s, right? So when they pumped my stomach, I think they basically put a Hoover tube down my. So who knew? But no. So my background, I have spent nearly, I think, 25 years working in design and branding and advertising. I had quite a traditional formal graphic design education through uni. Computers and Apple Macs were blossoming just about then. Emails started to be a thing, but we were, I say at the time, forced, but encouraged. We weren't allowed to basically use computers for the first 2 years. There were computers, but we had to learn how to hand render typography with a pencil and a pica ruler and all kind of boring shit like that, which at the time we were a bit like, oh, I've got this, man, we've got a Mac, huh? But actually, you know what? It instilled certainly in me, from a personal point of view, instilled that understanding of craft and attention to detail. And when you have to hand render, a page from a fictional novel at 8-point type over 12-point leading in pencil and make it legible and make it perfect, you have an appreciation for when you open InDesign, and you can do that within nanoseconds. So yeah, I spent 25 years, thereabouts. For 23 of those, I've had my own company. So I did like a year and a half, I think, when I finished university in Nottingham Trent. And then I worked with a really great small studio in London. And all 3 of the founders had done a master's at St Martin's. So I thought that'd be a great idea. So I went and did an MA at St Martin's. I probably didn't take it as seriously as 99% of the other students. I used it as an opportunity to network and find freelance work, and then finished the MA. Got made redundant twice in 6 months at the crash that happened in 2000, like the .com crash, and decided that I would set up my own company. I basically wrote on a bit of paper. I had 2 columns, A and B, and A was all the people or companies that I wanted to work with or that I liked. And column B, all I wrote was start my own company. So I started a company called Plan B Studio, which I've had for 23 years this year, which has provided me with the flexibility I'm not going to use the word entrepreneur because I can't think of myself like that, because I don't think I am. But it's been made like my base, like, you know, base camp that you'd have if you go climbing. And sometimes I've left base camp and I've gone and worked with other agencies, sometimes for a couple of years. And the Plan B Studios kind of always ticked along and has its own clients. And then, about 18 months ago, or just under, Andy and I started having a chat. So just so you know, Andy and I went to school together. So I've known him, we've known each other for a very long time. And I was always aware of Pantera Team Asia, which is what LKYSUNZ was before it became LKYSUNZ. And I kind of did some work with Andy on it, on and off. And then, just about 16 months ago, he was like, could you come on board, you know, and work with us to kind of give it some shape? So that's what I've been doing. I think when I joined, they had one PDF. So they had more than that, but it was a lot of stuff written down, but it wasn't, you know, it hadn't kind of blossomed into the vision that, you know, Andy, Benjamin and Paul had kind of foreseen. So that's what I've been doing with them.
It's amazing. I mean,
so for the listeners though, who is Andy?
So we've got three founders. There's Benjamin Duran, who kind of, I suppose, came up with the idea for what was Pantera Team Asia, which, well, actually, no, it started out as, I think, F1 China, or China F1.
Okay.
Benjamin's background, he spent his entire career running, building teams. He's won Le Mans in the GT. He's run LMP2 teams. He started the streetcar series in Dubai. He's got a lot of experience in motorsport. You've got Benjamin Fleming, who's kind of more. He's our chairman, has had a career in investment and finance. And then you've got Andy Pyra, who's the other founder, who's the chief commercial officer of LKYSUNZ. And he and I are the ones that went to school together and had our first shit job together working at a local pub restaurant, where Andy will tell you he started smoking because of me. But just so your listeners are aware, I don't advocate smoking. I currently vape, which I blame on my son. The reason that we started smoking was anyone that's worked in the restaurant industry, and it's still true today, will know that if you don't smoke, you never get a break. Yeah. And so in order to get a break every 20 minutes, I started smoking, and then Andy started smoking. So I didn't help him start smoking. He just followed the rest of the crew. So
he was a sheep. That's what you're trying to say.
No, he and I both were, because once you've worked in a kitchen and you've washed pots for like 2 hours and you're wet and covered in other people's food remains, you'll do anything to get out of the kitchen for a bit. And it's smoking. This is the early 90s. So although smoking was bad, it was still a thing. So
amazing. And just out of interest, the team over at LKYSUNZ, obviously Benjamin, Paul, Andy, and yourself. Obviously, Andy and yourself, we kind of know you guys have been friends for a long time. Andy brought you in. How did those three get together to start off with? Because they're a completely different mix of people.
It's a really good question. I don't know if I know the answer. They were kind of they're all kind of working in and around the similar kind of stuff. So you'd have to ask them actually. But there are other people as well involved with LKYSUNZ. Obviously, I've talked about the three founders. Myself, we've got Emma Norfolk, who's Chief Operations Officer, who is a force to be reckoned with, and kind of, I think, has helped give a lot of shape to a lot of the stuff that we've been doing in the last 6 months. And then there's Tim Milne, who's Chief Technology Officer, but the stuff that he's capable of doing and has been doing is it makes my head hurt. And then there's lots of other people that are working with us in partnership that we can't talk about, that are in the UK and in other countries in Asia and Africa. So there's lots of people waiting in the wings, to kind of help bring this to fruition as soon as that happens. But yeah, I don't actually know how they all met. They probably told me, I've probably forgotten, which probably means it wasn't that interesting, which means this should get edited. But don't edit nothing, I'd say.
Just for clarification, we don't actually edit anything really. We just kind of just go with it.
Yeah, this is true. What is the mission of Lucky Suns? Because we obviously know, but I think our listeners especially will find it really interesting because it's a very special kind of mission, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think that the thing that unites everyone that's involved in Lucky Suns has really stemmed from the kind of the vision that Benjamin certainly started, and Paul and Andy have kind of joined to kind of build upon. And a lot of it is to do with wanting to help kind of change the face and voice of motorsport and Formula One. There's a big issue with talent and diversity and equality and inclusivity, and those are three words that are easily bandied around. But I think the mission. Let's park. We intend to be, whatever we do, we intend to try and win races and win championships, right? That's what you do when you go into motorsport. So let's park that for a minute and just assume that that's a given, right? We're not coming into this to, just change the workforce. So, oh shit, yeah, we've got to run a race car or run a race team. We're here to kind of change the dynamics, particularly within Formula One. Formula One, whether it likes to admit it or not, some teams do. I know James Vowles has been quite public about talking about this, and Mercedes have got programs, and Red Bull as well. Some teams do a better job than others. But all of the teams are based in Europe. Formula One has always been, because of its inception, largely European and brackets UK based racing series. It's the pinnacle of motorsport, right? But if you look at all of the 10 teams, yes, they might have offices in America, but let's say all 10 teams are based in Europe, and 6 or 7 of them are all based in the UK. All of the teams have traditionally always hired from Russell Group universities, which is a small but very esteemed collection of universities in the UK, with some exceptions to universities in Germany and Italy and Switzerland. And that's great. But of course, that means that, over 99% of the current workforce that is made up of everyone that works in Formula One across all of the, kind of teams, over 99% are all white European. And, a lot of the drivers, are from European countries. And none of that's a bad thing. Nobody's saying that's a bad thing. But, we believe that, if Europe accounts for 9% of the global population, and if you take Africa and Asia as 2 continents that we want to base the team and have facilities in, that accounts for 80% of the population. So I'm not very good at maths, but I would hazard a guess that there are more Lewis Hamiltons and Max Verstappens and Adrian Newey's and Toto Wolffs out there than there are, just if you look into Europe. So there's a talent pool problem, and that's why you constantly see in the news, various people leaving current teams. It's this recycle, and they go from one team to another, and it becomes quite insipid. And it's like a jacuzzi. I don't know if you like jacuzzis. I like jacuzzis if I'm the only one in it, right? But the F1 paddock is sadly like a very big jacuzzi, but there's a lot of people in it, and it just becomes a bit of a human soup after a while. And so how do you help, expand not just the talent, but the growth of the audience? Well, we were always coming to the FIA with our bid about basing ourselves out of Southeast Asia. Having a base like that, having an F1 team based out of an Asian country immediately changes the dynamics of that local economy, local talent, putting academies and educational programs in place across Africa and Asia and North America with the historic Black colleges and universities. So our mission really is to bring, the opportunity and create actual pathways through education and into motorsport, which is why, Lucky Suns, yes, at the moment is in pursuit of and having conversations with various current F1 teams to purchase them. But there will be other formulas that we will hopefully be in that will be stepping stones for that talent to come into. And whether we were going to be starting a brand new Formula One team if we'd have got the license, or whether we are successful in buying a current team, you can't just walk in on day one and go, right, you lot, you're all binned, right? Off you go, right? Get in the recruits. This is a very long-term investment, and it has to be a long-term investment. Formula One's very good at turning up, doing a couple of donuts up and down the high street, and then buggering off again. And like I said, there are some teams are doing it better than others, but in order to help build that awareness, find, nurture, and educate the talent from other continents, never mind countries, you have to be there. You have to be boots on the ground, working with those established educational organizations, provide, actual curriculum, and have those universities do what basically the Russell Group universities do in the UK. Have those degrees. If you're a young kid in, I don't know, Ghana or Zimbabwe or Indonesia, and you love Formula One, or maybe you don't even know about it, but if you love Formula One, what are your opportunities to work in Formula One? Unless you've got a very wealthy background and they can afford to send you to university in the UK, or to send you to apply for a job and move, or maybe you're older and you've got, a family, it becomes incredibly difficult. And actually, so if you base yourself in, a country in Southeast Asia and have facilities there, and eventually build, your factories and employ people from there. And alongside that, you have academies that aren't just focused on drivers, but the whole ecosystem of Formula One and motorsport, from hospitality to aerodynamics to CFD experts to AI people. There's an enormous kind of ecosystem of jobs that motorsport requires. And so, to be able to have those institutions working alongside the facilities that we want to bring and the academies, suddenly you're making Formula One and the opportunity to work in motorsport actually much more accessible than it ever was before. And that broadens, the spectrum of talent that Formula One can be. And I think Benjamin answered it best recently. I think it was Tim on Motormouth podcast asked him something about what does success look like? And he said, when our team members get poached by other teams, because that's when we will hopefully we're not talking about existing people that work in Formula One. We're talking about that talent that we bring in the next 5 to 10 years. Once they start getting poached, that's when you can start to truly say, we told you we were going to bring a new voice and a new face. And here we are. That's the hope. That's a really long answer.
I liked
perfect,
it.
though.
It was good. It was amazing.
No,
So when you talk about like all these different types of like formulas that you might be going into, is like Formula E something that could be on the horizon for Lucky Suns? Because that's obviously catching a lot of attention at the minute.
Inspired by Kevin Magnussen's performance in the Jeddah Saudi Grand Prix at the weekend, I'm going to use my safe word, which is Magnussen, where I need to. But Formula E, we of course we're really interested in it, and we are in quite deep conversations with Formula E and a team in Formula E, because it's not Formula One. I don't know if you know that. Who knew? It is Formula E, and I think that there's a lot of changes happening at Formula E. I think Jeff Dodds and the changes that he's bringing in and personnel. I think honestly, if he and his team can't take Formula E to where we all believe it could probably go, then maybe nobody can. But I think if you look at how the state of engine manufacturers around the world are all working, by and large, most of them are all working to this kind of 2030 cutoff in the UK, especially, but across the world, engine manufacturers that haven't got, an EV program and lots of EV cars in the pipeline, whether EV is the future or not, it is certainly a stepping stone to what maybe, will become hydrogen. But for now, electric vehicles and the expansion of that in the last 5-10 years is huge. And with the impetus of the kind of the retail consumer sector being taken down the EV route, Formula E, I think, has got every potential of being, I don't know if it'll ever be Formula One in terms of its audience and scope, but it is growing massively in certain markets, because there's a huge swathe of audience that are either not interested in Formula One or for personal reasons feel more drawn to, you know, a series like Formula E or Formula Extreme E. I think that's changing to Extreme H soon. You know, because it aligns with what they see as the change that needs to come in the world. And so, you know, from a technology point of view, from a sustainability point of view, and from a racing point of view, you know, Formula E ticks lots of boxes. I think for us as a team, you know, to one day sooner or later potentially have, you know, a presence in Formula E, will sit very nicely with, you know, the program that we want to do, that will act as like a feeder for all of our talent to come into Formula One. So it's of great interest to us. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's really
And also,
cool.
you know, I think unlike Formula One, the racing is actually kind of crazy. I, as a fan, first and foremost, I am a motorsport fan. I will pretty much watch anything that's got an engine and wheels, or sometimes just on a water. But you know, I think it's I got into Formula E only probably about in the last 2 years, but mainly because of Dan Ticktum's radio messages, which I thought were fucking hilarious. And I think, you know, having those kind of personalities and different personalities to the ones you have in Formula One, where it's very polished and very media focused, and you know, Formula E is kind of like that. But I think there's I think there's an opportunity with Formula E to kind of actually for us to use it as a really great test bed for a lot of the ideas that we want to start doing in terms of, you know, fans and how we, you know, engage with fans and how we want to champion fans as well. They are the thumping heartbeat of any sport.
I think that's a really good point you make there. Is that, you know, Formula E does seem more accessible to fans. You know, I mean, with Formula One, obviously it's high ticket prices, and when you get in and around it, you can't really access too much there. It's kind of just a closed door. You can get to a certain point, and then it's just like you can't touch us type thing. Whereas Formula E is very much more open. But you've done something rather special. You've created something rather incredible in switching up. And why I believe it's so incredible is, firstly, that's how I met Hannah, which has completely changed my life, which has been absolutely amazing. So thank you for that, Steve. But tell us a little bit about switching up, where you got the idea from. Obviously, I know, but where did you get the idea from about switching up, and what is the purpose of it?
So let's go back. Let's go back about 14 months. Andy and I went out drinking, ostensibly with our notebooks and pens, and we came up with lots of stuff that night. Some of which made it into a Google document. Some of it that, yeah. I think I actually introduced Andy to Google Docs, and there's a litany of him and I swearing at each other whilst we're writing lots of the stuff down. But it kind of came from a number of places. One, it came from a conversation we had that night about, Andy was like, so do we need a website? And I was like, fuck no. What do you need a website for? Like, I'll ask both of you as motorsport fans, how often, from a Formula One perspective, let's start there. How often do you go to your team's Formula
Never.
One website?
Never.
Right? And I have asked everyone, and I've done a lot of calls with fans doing switching it up. Nobody's ever gone to a Formula One team website, right? And that's because Formula One, as a Formula One entity, or as a new motorsport entity, I said to Andy, there's only three audiences that are probably going to be going to our website: press, people looking for jobs, or investors. So actually, you know, if you do check out LuckySuns.com and you go there and you go, this looks a bit mental, that's on purpose, right? It ticks the boxes for, you know, any investors coming to see if we are doing what we're saying we're doing. It does that. If you want to find a job that doesn't quite exist yet, you can email us because there's an email. And if you're a journalist, there's also an email for you too. Beyond that, right now, it doesn't need to be any more than that. The second question Andy asked that I remember from that conversation was, so we're going to be on social media? To which I answered, no. And he was like, ooh. And Andy's background is, amongst many other things, he's done lots of things. He's quite interesting character. So he worked with Bernie Ecclestone for about 10 years with his business partner working in sponsorship. He managed and ran world poker tournaments. He's managed boxers. And he's like a kind of slightly more mild, calmer version of Dana White, who runs UFC. And Dana White is a bit like Marmite. I don't watch UFC. I don't really like fighting at all. But he's a character, right? And he literally says it how it is. And if you look at how UFC has grown, it's quite incredible what he's done. And I think part of that charm is, whether you agree with everything that comes out of his mouth or the fact that he supports Trump, it doesn't really matter. It's that kind of raw, honest, say it how it is. And I think that, so when we were talking about social media, I was saying to him, it's not that we're not going to be on social media, but I don't want us to have an admin account. If we're a team that is truly here to champion diversity, equality, and inclusivity, how can you do that if you've only got 1 or 2 or 3 people responsible for being that voice? And so once we came out of the fog of the FAI's decision to decline our application, and as it turns out, Andretti, sadly, which I think was a huge fucking mistake by the Formula One. And I hope, I'm going off on the side by it, I hope Andretti and GM are doing exactly what they should be doing, which is continuing to do what they should do and turn up in 2026 and go, we're ready to race. Because you know what? They've got an approval for a license. By the by, I think it's a great shame that happened. And I think the Andretti global team is an incredible racing, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of one. Racing entity, right? As a name in motorsport, it's as synonymous as Williams or Haas. It's not Haas, the F1 team, by the way. Newman Haas. That's the IndyCar team I used to watch when I watched IndyCar in the 90s. But we don't want just one person or a small team, just being responsible for trying to articulate, what we want to do. And so after we came out of that FIA fog, I was kind of just the one doing social media for LKYSUNZ. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, fuck this. I'm, as funny as I might be, I'm running out of things to say. And and so Andy was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, let's fast track the switching up thing. So switching up was always part of the plan. So even when we're a team, officially in whichever series we end up in first and second, we will keep doing this. So once every 2 weeks, or once every other week, we will get a fan to come in, not take over. They will take over our socials, but we'll still do stuff as well. But basically, switching up is inviting a fan that cares and is passionate about the sport to come in and take over the socials. And that's what we've been doing for 16 weeks now. And the point of it really is to give a platform, albeit a small one at the moment, but give a platform and a voice to fans that care passionately about the sport, and or what it is they do in life. We've had some incredible, people come on and talk on Switching Up about their experience of motorsport or, their passion for it and their frustration with it. It's a way of opening up that conversation. And it's a really small, for me, it's a really small indication of what we intend to do, which is to really champion fans as well as diversity and inclusivity and equality. And how do you do that? You literally just hand over the reins and go, here you go. Talk about whatever you want. And we have, as you will both know, because you've both been part of the Switching Up, I tend to have, a Zoom call or, chats with people, not really to interview them, but just to get to know them and hear the cut of their jib and get a sense for what they kind of might want to talk about. We don't curate it. I don't moderate it. In fact, actually, Rich, you have the record of being the only person we've had to delete a post from because you brilliantly kind of post that there about trying to find sponsorship for a driver that you're working with. And whilst we as a team fully endorse that, we couldn't be seen to be doing it for just one person when we're getting offers or requests from lots of people. So it's when I presented it to the team back in, I think it was November, to their credit, they were like, "Yeah, sounds good. Are you sure though? Like we're gonna give our social channels to someone we don't know that's a fan." I was like, "Yep." They're like, "You sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, like because I believe and I've seen it done." So it kind of a friend of mine called Vicky Ross, who's a really great copywriter in ad and brand land. She's got a huge following. She started doing this a few years ago now, where she, I think once a month, she hands over her Twitter feed to an up and coming new female copywriter, and they just get to take over her social for a day. The other source of inspiration was, I think it was in 2016, the Swedish Tourist Board, which is at Sweden on Twitter or X, whichever you like to call it. They basically handed over their Twitter feed to a Swedish citizen. So they curated it a little bit. They made sure that people were going to come on, but whatever they wanted to come on and talk about to celebrate Sweden, they did. And they ran that for, I think, 7 years. It was massively popular. So I've seen it happen. And I think the one thing that unites all of those things is people that are passionate about whatever it might be, whether it's Sweden or copywriting or motorsport. It's not impossible, but they're less likely to come on and make a dick of themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, people. I never really had dipped into the F1 community, and the reason for that is because no one in my house gives a shit about motorsport. Even Emma, who is the chief operations officer and also my wife, she's interested in the business side. So I've always had to watch motorsport on catch up, and so I usually avoid social media until I've watched the race because hashtag spoilers. But what Lucky Sons has kind of provided me is an awesome opportunity to literally dive into the kind of motorsport and Formula One community and get to know some incredible people and meet people like yourselves and learn about other people's interests and insights and passions and their viewpoints, because everyone's different. Everyone comes into the sport from a different perspective, whether you're here because you found DTS, Drive to Survive, or whether you watched it since you were in nappies. We don't care. And the last thing I'll say on it is the one lovely thing about switching it up. We were supposed to have Amy take over our socials, I think at the start of the year. And Amy's American, but has lived in Bangkok for the last 15 years. She went there for a year to work in a cat sanctuary. And she and I got chatting on, I think, Twitter. And she was like, "I'd really like to take part, but I'm just worried I'll probably end up talking about cats." And I was like, "Good. Come and talk about cats. Come and talk about the great work you're doing in Bangkok in your cat sanctuary." She's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah. This isn't... Switching it up is not limited to Formula One or motorsport. It's about fans coming and talking about their interests and their passions, because that's what makes the sport. Sport is nothing without fans. Formula One is nothing without fans spending their hard-earned bucks on $100 T-shirts, walking around like a billboard with sponsor logos on it. Cool. If that fills your boots, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But so in the end, she couldn't take over because sadly her dad passed away on New Year's Eve. And so I talked to her and I said, "Look, obviously don't worry about switching it up. You come and do it whenever you're ready. But if you would like," because her dad was I think a lawyer, but he was a massive motorsport enthusiast and an amateur photographer. And so I said, "Look, with your permission, I'd love to post one of his photographs and pay tribute to him once a day for 5 days." And so we did that. And I think it's just been a really lovely way of, connecting with the F1 and the motorsport community. And that's how it will run. So whichever teams we end up buying, we're probably going to scare the shit out of them, because Lucky Sons will never do anything that is typical of a current motorsport or Formula One team. That much I can guarantee.
See, absolutely unbelievable. I'd love hearing this. And I mean, we've had 34 minutes of this podcast episode already, and we try and keep it at 30 minutes. So we've already gone over, which may I've got so many more questions to ask. But with asking,
thanks very much.
yeah. See you later. Goodbye. No, so with asking, we always finish on one final question. And that is, if you could spend an hour with someone, whether they're alive or dead, who would it be and why?
That is a very good question. I've got a few rumbling through my head. I'm gonna go I'm gonna go with what I know. So I'm gonna say Eddie Vedder, lead singer of Pearl Jam, right? So I met him once and got drunk with him after they played a gig in London. And he's always struck me as quite a sensitive, thoughtful soul. And he is. I mean, I didn't really get to kind of, talk to him for hours, but I think he kind of represents to me also the reason why I love a lot of certain hip hop. And when I was about 14, and I think Pearl Jam kind of really exploded in the UK and the whole grunge scene, for me, I think I connected with it because his songwriting, or them as a band, it kind of came from a point of principle, and there was a story behind, a lot of their songs. They were linked to like things that had happened in the press, and that's nothing new in music. But I think the way it was delivered, and still to this day, I'm still a fan of Pearl Jam. In fact, my dad actually rang me the other day and he said, I'm going to ruin your birthday surprise. It's in July 10th, in case you're interested. My dad's actually bought me and him tickets to go and see Pearl Jam, but he was like, I've had to buy a seat because, my prostate. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. We won't go to the mosh pit, but I think like music's always played a massive part in my life in varying ways, and whilst hip hop is a massive influence on stuff that I do and how I think, and certainly how LKYSUNZ thinks, there are go-to like musicians and artists that I go through phases, but I've always kind of come back to Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder just because I like anything that feels like it's coming from a place of honesty. And Andy will tell you as well as me that everything we do with LKYSUNZ, we want people ultimately to feel something. And that's a really wanky, vague thing to kind of say, like, oh, we want people to feel something. But we want to bring that energy, and we want to do things, and we know we've got ideas that will become incredible, like for fans, and I want people to walk away from things that we do and go, holy shit, that was actually fun. Not because they've had logos thrown at them and because it's a welcome to a LKYSUNZ event, because they've gone there and they've felt something and they've met people like you two have met through switching it up. And that to me is what LKYSUNZ is, and it stems from that point of place of like coming at it from a point of passion. And I think as long as you're passionate about whatever it is you're trying to do, I think that will warm to people, even if they don't agree with whatever your passion is. I think, delivering something with something from the heart, and you speak from the heart and you know it and you live it and you breathe it. So to all the entrepreneurs out there, that would be my advice as well. Like, and I think that to me, what Eddie Vedder represented when I was 14 and smoking out my bedroom window and drinking Southern Comfort neat with no ice.
Oh, Steve, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for spending your time. I'm sure we would love to have you on again at some point in the future. And especially when you can.
When you got the news.
Yeah, well, it makes it difficult to have these questions and obviously talk about stuff when there's so many things going on behind the scenes that you're not allowed to talk about. I know there's plenty of NDAs in place with different people, so when things are more open, that would be amazing to talk about stuff and obviously the future, and when you guys are sure of what's going on as well, which will be amazing. So, but thank you so much, and we're certainly gonna stay in touch with you and watch what you're doing very, very closely. So I think you've got two big fans here anyway. But yes, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
And Hannah, thank you as well for being on and always providing value, smiles, and happiness into our lives. So, guys, thank you very much. Look after yourselves and take care.
Cool, man. Thank you.